Okay, well, that's good. Okay. Now,
You
I
want to
can,
try playing a little bit?
yeah, I will.
Talking?
I would like to try that.
And, well, do this for however long you feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
I hate this.
Oh, let me grab that chair for you.
No, that's okay. No,
I'll put it back here.
It won't be in the picture.
Oh, well, it's just, I don't want you sitting on top of me. It'll just, watch out for the doggy. Okay.
The only thing I have is that will need some attention of batteries for the wireless.
Okay. Let's see now. Whew.
Did you bring some headphones down?
I did, right behind you. Okay.
Oops, you need an adapter for this.
Oh, and I don't have one. I have a different set of headphones upstairs that might have the small.
This one has a small, that takes a large one.
Oh, I lost it.
I got one.
Yeah, okay. I'll just start by talking.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Susan Merdinger. I'm a Steinway artist, and I'm a teacher and a performer. And I'm here to provide with you, to stream to you 25 top practice tips that I will go through one by one. And with a 10-minute time limit, it will be rather quick. Each one of these tips, or several of them combined, could be the foundation for a full-length live stream tutorial. So the live stream tips that I have fall into three categories: general advice, and technical practice tips, and musicianship and memorization tips. So here we go. General tips. The first thing that I recommend, and it seems like self-evident, is to practice when you're fully alert and awake. If you're exhausted from a day of rehearsals or teaching or whatever, it's going to be really hard for you to concentrate and focus. And practicing requires a tremendous amount of mental energy. I instruct all of my students to make sure that they are awake, that they're well fed, that they're not feeling hungry and distracted or simply exhausted. And so many parents these days overprogram their kids and expect them to go to school all day and then do after-school activities and then come home, do homework, and then practice. So you have to practice when you're alert. I recommend, whether you're a student or a professional or aspiring professional, that you do your practice at the time when you have the most energy. For many people, that could be in the morning, or it could be split up at various times during the day. So that's number one. Number two, I recommend that you keep a piano journal, a practice journal, and a piano journal. And I have several for sale. One that I personally curated myself, and it's a wonderful journal with a quote on every single page from a musician, a philosopher, an artist, something to give you motivation and inspiration. I think that it's important for you to keep this journal to track what you've practiced, for how long, and this will help you with time management and goal setting. And you write everything down, what you practiced, write down tempo markings, metronome markings that you're working on for each piece that you're working, and what you achieved in each session. And now, number three, record yourself every week at least. This enables you to listen back and get a more objective feedback than what you're actually hearing when you're practicing. It gives you feedback on your sound, your interpretation, and also your technique. You can hear mistakes more objectively when you're not focused on actually in the act of playing the piano and practicing. And now the next number, 4, would be the 80-20 rule. And this, simply stated, is spend 80% of your time practicing 20% of any piece that you're working on that is the most challenging 20% of that piece. So you balance that with full run-throughs so that you can get consistency, but you have to remember that what's also difficult for you may be difficult for another different section, may be difficult for someone else. Not everyone is going to find the same sections equally difficult. So this is really, you have to decide this, not your teacher, not anyone else, what's the most difficult. Just be careful that you don't neglect the so-called easier passages or movements, the slow movements, because very often we neglect to spend as much time of repetition in slow movements, and because of that, that's where we might have a memory lapse in a performance. I've seen this happen. It's happened to me too. So the reason when you're practicing something slow that's relatively easy, if you do fewer repetitions, then you have less muscle memory to fall back on. Number 5, non-linear practice. This is especially important, not just for professionals, but for young students and older adult students as well. Basically, what that means is that you should avoid always starting from the beginning of your pieces. Practice your difficult sections first, start from the end of your piece, or work on the middle sections to gain some flexibility. And the corollary to this is also number 6, practice multiple pieces simultaneously. Like a balanced diet, variety keeps the practicing engaging and productive. And psychologists have shown that, let's say you're sitting down to eat dinner. If you're offered one food, let's say chicken, you will tire of eating that chicken and you will stop eating much sooner than if you were offered an 8-course meal. And you will tend to, at a banquet, for example, or a buffet, eat so much more than you would otherwise. So if you're trying to be on a diet, don't go to a buffet. But this comes in very handy when you are teaching or when you're studying. If you only have one piece to practice, you're going to tire of that piece and you're going to stop practicing when you sort of hit your point of no return on any given day. So if you have more than one piece to practice, then instead of practicing for half an hour on that piece, you'll have another piece to go to and practice another half hour, and then another half hour on a third piece. And so in that way, you should be juggling your pieces. You should have a couple of pieces that you're working on simultaneously. And when you're doing this, you have to also be thinking as a professional, like a cook does, which pieces are on the front burner and which pieces are on the back burner for maintenance. Front burner, those are the ones that you're actively learning. Those require the most amount of effort, initial effort, and it's sort of like climbing Mount Everest. Once you're up there, you can enjoy the view, but until you get there, you're going to have to really put in a lot of work when you first start a piece. I know it feels really hard. All of my students say, oh, starting a new piece, but it's also the most exciting. And I remember when I was a kid, and I remember when my kids were kids, every time someone would come over, they always wanted to play their very brand new piece because that's what they had so much excitement about, even if it wasn't ready, and it really would drive me nuts. Okay, warm-ups matter. Here, this is one thing that I love to do. I like to have these like rubber gel silicone balls. If I don't have access to a piano and I'm backstage, I like to use these. And I learned that just squeezing something in your left hand really helps activate the brain in a good way for music. But I like squeezing both hands just for warming up when you don't have access to a piano. So I love these things. You can get them on Amazon. Then the other thing that I do is full body warm-ups with arm circles, standing up, and deep breath in through your nose and exhaling through your mouth very slowly and coming down, rotating the wrists. And you wouldn't believe how much this helps increase your blood flow. So that's a wonderful warm-up exercise. It's kind of like doing jumping jacks, and if you're feeling cold, then you want to really warm up, maybe run up and down some stairs to get your blood going. If you're feeling rather hot and it's like one of these god-awful, really hot days and there's no air conditioning, maybe you're playing an outdoor concert or something, then you want to try to cool yourself off, and putting your hands under cold water can sometimes help. So my teacher, Ward Devaney, always said, you have to think about whether you're going to play like fire on ice or ice on fire. Okay, mental practice. This is, again, we're still in the general tips. This is number 8. Narrate your pieces aloud, visualize playing them, and listen to recordings while you're studying the score. We have so many tools available to us now that were never available. If you're not making use of them, then you're missing out on important learning. And the one thing that really hasn't changed in 250 years of classical music is the difficulty of the music has not changed, and the amount of time that it takes to learn a piece. Well, as humans, I don't think that our capacities have increased that much. There's ongoing debates about whether the musicians today have better technique than the musicians of like 100 years ago. And I don't really think that's the case. I think that, that's the one thing about music, is that we are, it has a lot more to do with the emotions and our interpretation, and this is a very personal thing. So we can't really increase our level of productivity. We can only try to increase our efficiency, but even if we, through all of our knowledge of psychology and physical training, we're still all humans. Beings haven't changed that much in our physical capabilities or our mental capabilities in the last 100 years. Maybe it'll be different like 100 years from now, but that's it. So number 9 is train like an athlete. And this means getting proper nutrition, proper rest, all kinds of physical conditioning that's safe to improve your focus and concentration. And you should avoid activities that will strain your wrists, your shoulders, but you do have to strengthen them. So some of the things that I like are swimming. I like yoga in moderation, certainly Pilates. I certainly like sport. I like to play tennis, but I don't do it right before a concert. Ping pong is a little safer, if you ask me. When I was in Fontainebleau, that's all we did was play ping pong, because the hand-eye coordination, it's very fast and it's light, so you're not going to strain yourself so much. Walking, I think, is the best thing. Horowitz, I think, used to walk like 3 miles a day, or Rubinstein said, you have to walk every day so that your fingers can run. Okay, the last thing, number 10, for my general tips is to build your speed, your tempo strategically. Don't learn your piece only at a slow tempo, and you've got the whole piece learned and you can play it perfectly only at half tempo. And then you go and you try to figure out, now how am I going to get to play it up to tempo? I have countless students that come to me and they say, I can play it all slow, but I don't know how to get it from slow to fast. I don't know how to be able to play it up to tempo the way I want it to sound. Well, This is where you have to practice from the very get-go, from the beginning of your study of the piece, from slow to fast. Just use the smallest sections possible and practice each section the slowest as you're learning it, and then a little faster, and then a little faster. And if you have to separate the hands to get it up to tempo, no matter how small, it could be a beat to beat. It could be a downbeat to a downbeat, like one measure or a beat to a beat, just a few notes. You have to practice it from slow to fast as you're learning the piece. And in this way, you will ensure that the fingering that you select and choose for a passage actually work at the fast tempo. Because you can go through and select your fingerings and be able to play them at a slow tempo and then discover that some of the fingerings don't really work at the fast tempo. Then what do? Then you have to undo all that muscle memory to be able to play it fast and change fingering and everything. So build your speed strategically. Okay. Oh, okay. Do you want to go home? I'm just practicing now. I'm just going to keep the live stream on. So how do I?
I'll tell you what, why don't we shut the live stream down right now?
Uh-huh.
And you can kind of review it and then go back.
Oh, I didn't get to play anything yet, so let me play something. Okay, let me play something. Okay, now I'm going to go on to technical tips practicing, and the first one that I have on the list is the ghosting method. And in this passage from Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1, it's a perfect way to illustrate. I was practicing this to perform it in Mexico several years back, and I discovered that my left hand really didn't know the piece by itself. I just was completely unable to play it. It was just sort of like following along with the right hand. And so that's when I started. So if you don't practice hands separately, you're in big trouble. But once you get it down pat, hands separately, and get your fingering all set, then you can also do something where you just practice one hand super light, like this. So that's where you get the left hand. Now you can do the same thing with the right hand. Notice that sometimes this causes your hands to separate and not play together, as you just heard. So you have to really work on this technique, because regardless, this also helps you control the relative dynamic levels of both hands. So that's ghosting. Rhythmic variations. We've heard countless times about doing dotted rhythms. Well, obviously, that's absolutely wonderful to do. So you could do the. Sure, we can do that. But did you ever think of taking something that's already dotted and undotting it? Something that's already kind of syncopated or has very short notes and making them longer. So I can think of two places in Tchaikovsky where it goes like this. Now, have you ever thought of... Now, I chose to use very detached fingering using 2 and 3, 2 and 3. Some people like to do it a little differently, but the point that I'm trying to make is that you can get a very different appreciation to make sure that you don't shortchange the really short notes. For example, even in the first movement where it goes... Or, so let's say you're doing that passage, but how about if you did it... Okay, so let's say you do. Then when you have to do it, so you can definitely get a different sense to change your rhythm or change your articulation, not just the rhythm. And here, but. Okay, backwards practice. This is working on difficult passages in reverse. And then we have odd even practice. Now this is where this technique was passed down to me from Ozan Marsh, and this was where he would recommend that you play only like odd numbered measures while you think the measures in between. This really helps to firm up your memory and makes it possible for you to like literally start in any measure. So let's say you're doing the third movement of Beethoven Opus 109. So what you do is you just think through the measures that are even numbers while you play the odd numbers. Then you do the reverse. You don't play the first measure, and then you won't play the third, but you only play the second measure. So, so in that way, you know exactly where your beats are. You know exactly how each measure starts. If you have any kind of memory lapse, you can actually start and pick up, and you can move forward, never move backwards. And we have articulation and pedal awareness. Now, this is interesting in that when you see a staccato, it doesn't mean no pedal. It doesn't mean it has to be dry as a bone. You have to be willing to use pedal. Likewise, avoid overusing the pedal as a substitute for clean finger work and having a true finger legato. So then forte playing versus piano playing. This is all about the physics of music, and this has to do with using your larger muscle groups of your shoulder and your back and your arms to play louder, and using just your wrist and your fingers to play softer. Use the smallest digit for lightness. So, you know. So there, I'm playing, you can play octaves very quickly if you're moving from the wrist. When you want big octaves, notice a lot of arm, shoulder, and a lot more height off the piano. So stay close to the keys, use your smallest digits, and that's how you can play really, really light. So in music, you have the duality of tension and release in your music and in your muscles. Take, for example, sometimes you have to do this in one hand, like the Schumann Carnival. So notice that the top voice, you have a lot of tension in that top note. But you have the thumb that has to be, this part of the hand has to be super light and bouncing ever so light. So that's the duality. Then the last tip for technical tips is mind over matter. This was Seymour Lipkin's advice to me when I couldn't play Opus 81A of Beethoven, the opening. It had all these double notes. And he said to me, will yourself to play it. At the time, I was very, very upset because I felt that that was not the answer to the problem. I wanted more of a technical solution. And the fact of the matter is I had all the technique to do it, but I wasn't focusing on it. I wasn't focusing on it when I got to that passage. And as soon as I started to hyper-focus when I got to that one spot and will myself to play it correctly, I started doing it more consistently and regularly, and then that became habit. And I also began to appreciate his words, because so much of what we do is mind over matter, but it's also about knowing when we have to turn on our focus. And if you watch videos of Vladimir Horowitz, you can see him, as still as he might be in his body, but you can see in these videos, he knows exactly where he has to look to provide the right visual focus to hit the bass note or to play something. He knows exactly where he has to look every minute of his performance. So that's why your mind over the matter is going to help you play your best. And there's a whole episode, live stream I could do on the psychology of concentration and focus. And then I have now 5 more top tips for musician and memorization. One is you have 4 different types of memory: oral, your hearing, your visual, and that could be looking at your hands or looking and having a photographic memory of your score, your tactile muscle memory, and also your analytical memory. So that leads me, you have to utilize all 4. That's one tip. And the most important thing that I can think of is when you're studying a piece is to have that, create a roadmap of that, whatever piece you're doing. Create a mental roadmap, chart it out, have like a visual imagery, but know what your structure is, know what your underlying harmonies are, know exactly where you are and when you are, and look for differences. Look for those little forks in the road where the music takes you. My 21st tip now is to memorize your left hand independently. So, that's from the 3rd movement of the Tchaikovsky Piano Concerto No. 1. Maybe some of you don't, if you haven't played it, you might not know it. You might not know it unless you have heard the whole thing together. So it's really critical to memorize that left hand separately, because to know your left hand really solid is going to firm up everything about your memory. Your understanding the harmony is going to be largely coming from your bass, but you'll also discover, especially if you're not a left-handed person as I am, where a substantial amount of weakness could be in your playing. And then number 22 of my tips. This is something that maybe not a lot of you might do, but it's so effective. Practice with your eyes closed. This is something that I intuitively did from the time I was a little girl. I think I was just like totally afraid that I might someday become blind. But it wasn't until I actually taught a blind student that I discovered that this blind student had a much better kinesthetic sense and could get around the piano so well without even looking. And I realized just how important it is, what I've been doing all along. And the reason it's important is that if you play chamber music and you have to look at and cue and look away from the piano, you're not even looking at your music, you're not even looking at your hands. You're looking somewhere else. So you really have to be able to play without looking at your hands, and you also have to be able to play without looking at your music, even when you're using music. So practice with your eyes closed. If you have difficulty with a passage and you practice with your eyes closed, you might find that you'll play some wrong notes initially, but as you do it more and more, you'll get it right. And then when you open your eyes and when you realize that, well, maybe I really do need to see this passage and I want to use every faculty to my advantage, you'll discover that it actually becomes easier. But not only that, when you close your eyes during practice, you engage your ears. And that opens up a whole critical listening ability that is so late and so difficult to develop in young musicians and older musicians as well. We're always working on that. And I'm almost done. Let me just finish because I just have to practice what I'm doing. There's three more. Interpretation over versus over analysis. Now, this pointer is taken from a comment by the great Leon Fleischer in a master class that I heard him give. And he said, don't overinterpret every line and dot and everything. In other words, balance your adherence and faithfulness to the score with some level of artistic freedom and discretion. Use your ear. There's times when staccato passages will not sound so great if you just play them staccato. And you will have to use the pedal for color, for adding resonance, especially in a dry hall. And now, last 2 pointers. Tempo is the most important determinant of your interpretation. This is a point that was told to me by members of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, with whom I had the great pleasure to collaborate on many occasions in the chamber music series. And this will determine your overall interpretation. If, we could go into a whole live stream just dedicated to tempo. How fast is too fast, and how slow is too slow? One person's adagio is another person's andante. We can explore that more. And then the last and perhaps the most important tip that I have is for you to spend time away from the piano. Yes, spend it away from the piano, studying your music, your scores, doing mental practice, listening to recordings, but also have some fun doing other things like reading or watching movies, playing ping pong, playing chess, swimming, walking, whatever it is that you enjoy, because all work and no play makes Johnny a dull boy or Jenny a dull girl. So that's the end of my 25 tips. And tomorrow, when I do this for real, I hope I'll have more examples set up to demonstrate. Just wanted to get through talking it. Thank you, Ed, for helping me set up. I have to give credit to Ed Ingold for helping me with this setup. So I will get a chance to listen to it, and we'll see how it goes. Tomorrow is the day. Thank you. Good night. Let's end the stream. Let me see if I can do this myself. End stream. Okay.
The fade to black is a nice way of doing that. You just have to be careful not to hit it accidentally.
Yeah, if we turn it back on.
You have